The company that we're going to present today is AMN Healthcare Services. There are two publicly traded nurse staffing firms. Uh, AMN is the larger of the two. They are the number one provider in aggregate. So if you include nurse, allied, which is physician's assistants, and all the other personnel that go along with providing services, as well as doctors. They provide general practitioners as well as specialists on a temporary basis, and they really help large healthcare systems staff their um, their hospitals, their clinics, etc. And they also have been adding a lot in the technology area. So this is their slide. It just gives you kind of a sense for the business if you're not familiar with it. But at its core, it is healthcare staffing, and the largest of which is nurse staffing. So this business has been assembled over time as a roll up. The roll up has many segments, and you can see them on the left side of the slide here. Many businesses that have been added for different, like I said, technology additions or getting into other doctors, which they call locums. That's the industry description. But what that adds up to on the right-hand slide is this is just nurse, okay? So nurse data here on the right. There's the largest player in this space is Eye Healthcare, and you probably heard a lot. The listeners heard a lot about Aya over time. They were a significant market share taker under their founder. Unfortunately, the founder passed away at a very young age. Very unfortunate and disheartening situation for that business and for their family. But what that it leaves Aya somewhat less aggressive as they were in the past. And when we get to where the cycle is going, we think that really matters. So there's some data on kind of how the business was assembled, their solutions, and where they sit today. So this business is classically cyclical. Okay, it's been cyclical for multiple decades, and we think it'll be cyclical going forward, right? As healthcare companies, hospitals, and the like they staff primarily with full-time, permanent employees. And as the natural cadence of things occurs, there is need for temporary labor, be that plugging a hole of a nurse who left, or a specialist who left a certain practice. Or it can be as simple as, hey, in Florida, there's an influx of snowbirds that skew older on average, and we need more nurses in Florida during the winter than we do in the summer. And so how do these healthcare companies staff? And they use temporary labor, and they use not only internal teams, but also working with some of the larger participants, as we showed on the last slide, to help staff that. Now, clearly, in COVID, nurses were rock stars from the medical standpoint, but the demand skyrocketed materially. And so after COVID, you can see 2020 and then into 21 and 22, the profitability of nurse staffing was extreme. And the reason it was is because the demand was so high. The hospital systems were saying, look, get us a doctor, get us nurses, get us staffed appropriately. Cost is a secondary issue to patient care, which makes sense. And nurse rates, particularly on the travel side, spiked, and they got as high as 3 to 4 times, what a permanent nurse would cost. And then so what you would see is then after COVID, as the hospital and healthcare systems were attempting to right size their cost structure, they were able to shift away from temporary labor to permanent labor, and that spread, which used to be hundreds of percent, is now in and around 10%. So very, very low spread. And AMN captured a lot of excess profit for excess economic profit for providing that service in the COVID aftermath. And this is actually how we found this company. We were short shares of AMN Healthcare during 22 and 23, simply because the street was modeling the profitability of the industry as stable going further. And we saw, and what we saw coming out of the healthcare system and hospitals in particular was a desire to reduce that cost, and they could do that with permanent labor. And so we shorted shares of AMN, covered that a couple of years ago. But as the industry has normalized, the numbers have come down, 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 down. We believe that, in fact, the inflection is now going the other way. And so you can see, 13F, and we're presenting this as a long idea, that we are long shares of AMN Healthcare and like it for the next year or two. We can get into that. But why would we own AMN? There's 4 reasons. We'll go through them quickly and then we'll unpack a little bit. And then that will be the totality of the presentation. So they're a large, diversified, scaled business. They are national. They can do a lot of staffing solutions. Like I said, nurse, allied, doctor, even some hospital administrator type roles, in a way that not only do they have a deep bench, if you will, of potential candidates, but they have these enabled technology solutions. And these technology solutions plus teams of people who have these deep relationships allow AMN to successfully serve their customers' needs. This is a key point. We believe the market is inflecting. We believe the hospital administrators are recognizing that they can't cut temporary costs anymore. And in fact, they need to raise compensation to elicit travel nurses to accept those roles. And so we have begun to see in data coming from the industry the numbers beginning to go up. One thing here, and not to get too into the weeds, during COVID, there was a lot of technology-focused peers, many backed by private equity, who thought that they could solve the problem with technology. And while technology is helpful, it doesn't provide an encompassing solution to fill these roles. And so we're seeing some of those players struggle, especially as rates have come down. Okay, so there's a couple overhangs, but we believe each of those overhangs is mitigated or more than mitigated, right? There's a large contract with Kaiser. Kaiser is a large system with whom AMN has had a very significant and long-term relationship. Kaiser felt the need, simply from a best practices standpoint, to go out and formally review that process. And I expect most of every healthcare staffing firm in the United States will be bidding on that and trying to win it. We believe there's a significant probability that AMN will retain that contract. That should occur, that contract re-up. The current contract ends at the end of 2026. We believe that happens in the first half of 2026 in terms of the announcement of renewal. If they don't, just to get in front of that question, we believe they won't lose a full 16% of the revenue. They will still get that. It gets into the technicalities of how the industry is served, but we don't believe it's a 16% revenue decline. It's probably more like half of that. Okay, and as we roll into the back half of 26, there's a lot of vendor management systems and technology related opportunities that AMN is currently bidding on. So none of that's in the numbers. Those are potential for increases in revenue and free cash flow. This company is levered. They have 6% debt. So that's kind of tells me it's not the debt markets don't view this company as stressed, but given the continued reductions in the bill pay spread and profitability over the last couple of years, the headline leverage, which if you look it up right now, LTM is 3.9 times, appears high. That may keep some participants away from being long AMN. We think that trends below 3 over the next year and a half. Okay. And then the last point, which is in yellow because it's key, the direction of the numbers here is up. We believe 2026 begins a beat and raise story where the street is currently modeling the business the way it was being modeled, which is the same way when we were short, when the stock was much higher than it was, the street was modeling no change. It's the same situation today. We believe those numbers are going up. We believe the street will have to play catch up. And that's the direction of numbers is one reason we think AMN is a good long today. And then last, and it gets to the core of who we are as fundamental investors. This business generates a lot of cash. Pre-COVID, his business was generating $150 million of cash, and they have added significant technology capabilities, doctor staffing, et cetera. So we can discuss the right multiple and all that. I think the multiple will go up, but even if it doesn't, these guys are going to generate cash, and they have a lot of ample opportunities to deploy it. So this is, at its summation, the reasons to own AMN. So let's just kind of unpack them a little bit.